Mike Dell's World number 229 for November 10th, 2015.
Don't bend the space-time continuum for me, babe.
Quit screwing around with that thing. You found Mike Dell's World. And good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever the case may be. This is Mike Dell. And let's see, today is November 10th, as I said at the beginning there, and it's the 40th anniversary of the sinking of the Edmund Fitzgerald. And of course, if this was a radio station, I would be playing Gordon Lightfoot's song here, but I can't do that because this is a podcast. And I got enough to talk about that I don't need to play a long song. So anyway, of course, many of you probably have heard that song by Gordon Lightfoot. Maybe you haven't. But I just wanted to tell you a little bit about the Fitzgerald. The Edmund Fitzgerald was an American Great Lakes freighter. And, of course, it sank in the storm on Lake Superior on November 10th, 1975, with the loss of the entire crew of 29. The ship was launched on June 7th, 1958. And for a while, she was the Queen of the Lakes, which is given to the ship that is the largest. The current holder of that, and probably for the foreseeable future, is the Paul A. Tregurtha, which is 1,016 feet long, I think. But there's a whole bunch of the 1,000-footers that they can't even get off the lakes if they wanted to, as far as actually floating them off the lakes. The Fitzgerald would have fit through the St. Lawrence Seaway, I believe. It was 700 and... I'm trying to look here. See, I'm kind of just sort of going from memory, and I also have the Wikipedia page up, which I'll have a link to. It's 729 feet long, and like I said, was the largest ship on the lakes, I think for a couple of years. I think in 1959, some other ship was built that was slightly longer, and that's how they do it. They keep making them longer and longer. That's why Tregurtha probably will be the longest ship on the Great Lakes for a long time, because the biggest lock currently at the Sault locks in Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan, and Ontario, the longest lock is, I think, 1,018 feet. So Tregurtha can barely fit in there. And if it can't get into Lake Superior and out of Lake Superior, it doesn't do very well as a Great Lakes freighter, especially hauling iron ore or tactonite. And that's what the Edmund Fitzgerald was carrying. Let's see, some of the other weird things about the Edmund Fitzgerald. It was named after the chairman of the board of, where is it? Chairman of the board of, what is that? Some insurance company in Milwaukee. Jeez, it was right here. Oh, well, I'm just flying blind here, so bear with me. But even when it was launched, there was all kinds of little goofy things and bad luck things. When Elizabeth Fitzgerald, wife of Edmund Fitzgerald, tried to christen the ship, when they smashed the bottle on the bow, it took her 3 attempts, and that's always bad luck. And there was a delay of 36 minutes while the shipyard tried to figure out how to release the keel blocks to get the boat to slide into the water. But they did. And on September 22nd, 1958, Fitzgerald completed 9 days of sea trials. It was Northwestern Mutual Insurance Company, those keeping score. But what I remember of it, I was 9 years old when it happened, and of course, it was very, much in the news around here because we have the Great Lakes freighters going here and there all over the lakes. I don't know how many there are currently on the lakes, but there's a bunch, and we see them periodically. We go up to Sugar Island, of course. We see them at the Soo Locks as they approach the Soo Locks from the south or come out of the locks from the north. And we see them in the straits when we go over the Mackinac Bridge, which we talked about a few days ago. And don't see too many of them in Grand Traverse Bay here where I live. Not for any real reason other than we don't have a lot of shipping in the bay. There's one dock in West Bay where they bring in fuel oil and gasoline and whatever. So it's just tanker ships that come in there, and they don't come in very often. Used to be coal ships would come in here back when we had a coal-fired power plant in Traverse City, but we no longer have that, and so there's no coal ships coming in. And then every once in a while when a big storm kicks up, like on the night of November 10th, 1975, but I'm sure there were some ships in the bay for that. They come in and anchor out of the weather, or at least out of the weather partially, as they can snuggle up to the shoreline on either Leelanau Peninsula side in West Bay or the Old Mission Peninsula side on East Bay. And depending on which way the wind's blowing, but it's mostly blowing out of the northwest when stuff like that happens. And on the night of the wreck, it was that way. So we don't, like I said, don't see a lot of these ships around here. But like I said, when the weather gets bad, they're in the bay. But a lot of times the visibility is such that we might see their lights at night, but don't really see them in clear days because on clear days they're going somewhere. They're not hiding out from the weather. But I'm just looking up some of the history of the Fitzgerald. It could haul 26,000 pounds of cargo, something like that. It had these sealed hatches on the top deck, and it was kind of an odd ship. Well, at least odd nowadays, because her sister ship's still out there, and I can't remember what the name of that ship is. I think it might be the Murray Bay or whatever it's named now. They keep changing the names of these ships too. But her sister ship is out there still going, and it has a forward pilot house. Most of the lake freighters nowadays have the pilot house in the back of the ship instead of on the front, and Fitzgerald was one that had it on the front, so it was one of the last of the old style freighters built on the lakes. Had originally coal-fired boilers, and they were converted to oil in the 71, 72 winter layup. And they also put a diesel-powered bow thruster on in 1969 to make it a little more maneuverable. And it's pretty amazing. You see those ships, and they can put them exactly where they want them nowadays, and it's fun to watch, especially when that bow thruster comes on and the whole thing kind of goes sideways. It's it's really neat to watch. But when they're coming up the St. Mary's there by Sugar Island, you sometimes see them use the bow thruster to get on one side of the buoy or the other, and it's a little faster maneuvering than throwing the rudder over to one side. And they don't want to do any big maneuvers in that river anyway. It's kind of skinny there. I mean, it's plenty big for two freighters to pass, but really not a lot of room for air in there. But let's see. Looking here, the Fitzgerald. This was another thing I had heard, and I'm not reading this, but that they kept getting the Coast Guard to up the total gross weight of the Fitzgerald so that they could continue to have record loads. And Its world record load that Fitzgerald had on there for a single trip was 27,402 tons. I don't know the difference between long tons and short tons because it says something like 30,690 short tons. So I don't really know what that means, but 27,402 long tons. And for 17 years, the Fitzgerald carried basically tactonite from Minnesota's Iron Range near Duluth, Minnesota, to ironworks in Detroit or Toledo and other ports. But just like I said, she had seasonal haul records of 6 different times. And it's, like I said, it was quite a ship. But I think the night that it sank, they had it overloaded. They had it loaded, with what the Coast Guard said it could take. But at some point, at some point, it probably got to be too much. So the night of the wreck, and I've got this timeline. This was at the ssEdmundFitzgerald.org site, the timeline for the 9th of November, 1975. At 8:30 a.m., the Edmund Fitzgerald was loaded with tactonite pellets at the Burlington Northern Railroad Dock No. 1 in Superior, Wisconsin. That's in the Duluth, Minnesota, Superior area there. And it was supposed to transport that to Zug Island in Detroit River. And apparently that's where they feed that stuff into all the ironworks down there, and probably the Ford Rouge plant and all that, where they make steel out of iron. And let's see, the Fitzgerald departed at 2:20 p.m. in Lake Superior en route to Detroit, and it had 26,116 tons of tactonite. At 2:39, the National Weather Service issues a gale warning for the area which the Fitzgerald is sailing in. Captain Cooper on the Anderson radios a freighter, the Edmund Fitzgerald, that he spots. That's the Arthur M. Anderson's, another ship that was following the Edmund Fitzgerald that whole day. At 4:15 p.m., the Fitzgerald spots the Arthur M. Anderson some 15 miles behind it. That was on November 9th. Okay, November 10th, 1 a.m., weather report from the Fitzgerald. The report from the Fitzgerald shows her to be 20 miles south of Isle Royal, winds at 52 knots, and the waves 10 feet in height. And Isle Royal is a federal park. It's the furthest north piece of land that's accredited to Michigan, but it's way up north in Lake Superior. It's so far out you can't see it from any land in Michigan. Of course, you can see it from Ontario, Canada, because it's a lot closer to that. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. 52 knot wind. That's pretty darn good with 10 feet waves. The lakes are pretty wicked. They're as big as oceans. They're inland seas. So anyway, 7 a.m. on the 10th, weather report from the Fitzgerald. Winds are at 35 knots, waves 10 feet. And this is the last weather report that the Edmund Fitzgerald will ever make. 3:15 p.m., Captain Jesse Cooper of the SS Arthur M. Anderson watches the Fitzgerald round Caribou Island and comments that the Fitzgerald is much closer to 6 Fathom Shoal than he would want to be. And 6 Fathom Shoal is a famous spot where lots of ships have wrecked, and it's there coming into Whitefish Bay, I believe. At 3:20 p.m., Anderson reports wind coming from the northwest at 43 knots. At 3:30 p.m., radio transmission between the Fitzgerald and the Anderson. Captain McSorley to Captain Cooper. McSorley says, Anderson, this is Fitzgerald. I have sustained some topside damage. I have a fence rail laid down, 2 vents lost or damaged, and a list. I'm checking down. will you stay by me until I get to Whitefish? And the Anderson comes back. Charlie on the Fitzgerald, do you have your pumps going? And McSorley says, yes, both of them. At 4:10 p.m., the Fitzgerald radios the Arthur M. Anderson requesting radar assistance for the remainder of the voyage. Fitzgerald, Anderson, this is Fitzgerald. I have lost both radars. Can you provide me with radar plots till we reach Whitefish Bay? Charlie on that, Fitzgerald will keep you advised of position. At 4:39 p.m., the Fitzgerald cannot pick up the Whitefish Point radio beacon. Fitzgerald radios the Coast Guard station in Grand Marais on Channel 16, the emergency channel. Between 4:30 and 5 p.m., the Edmund Fitzgerald calls for any vessel in Whitefish Point area regarding information about the beacon and light at Whitefish Point. They receive an answer by the saltwater vessel Avatars that the beacon and the light are not operating. Estimated between 5:30 and 6 p.m. Radio transmission between the Avatars and the Fitzgerald. Avatars, Fitzgerald, this is Avatars. We have Whitefish light now, but it's still receiving no beacon. Over. Fitzgerald, I'm very glad to hear it. Avatars, the wind is really howling down here. What are the conditions where you are? Fitzgerald, undiscernible shouts heard by the Avatars. Don't let nobody on deck, he's yelling. What's that, Fitzgerald? Unclear, over. Fitzgerald, I have a bad list. Lost both radars and taking heavy seas over the deck. One of the worst seas I've ever been in. Avatars, if I'm correct, you have 2 radars. Fitzgerald, they're both gone. Sometime around 7 p.m., the Anderson is struck by 2 huge waves that put water on the ship 35 feet above the waterline. The waves hit with enough force to push the starboard lifeboat down, damaging the bottom. At 7:10 p.m., this is still on November 10th, radio transmission between the Anderson and the Fitzgerald. The Fitzgerald is still being followed by the Anderson. They are about 10 miles behind the Fitzgerald. Anderson, Fitzgerald, this is the Anderson. Have you checked down? Fitzgerald, yes, we have. Anderson, Fitzgerald, we are about 10 miles behind you and gaining about 1.5 miles per hour. Fitzgerald, there is a target 19 miles ahead of us. So the target would be 9 miles ahead of you. Fitzgerald, well, I'm going to clear. Or, well, am I going to clear? Yes, he is going to pass you on to the west of you. Fitzgerald, well, fine. Anderson, by the way, Fitzgerald, how are you making out with your problem? We're holding our own. Okay, fine. We'll talk to you later. And, of course, they never did speak later. The 29 men on board Fitzgerald will never again speak, as I'm reading this from the timeline. And sometime between 7:20 and 7:30, it's estimated is when the ship vanished and sank. And I've got some actual radio transmissions just after that part in the timeline.
When we last had contact with him, the mate had talked to him at about 10 minutes after 7, 19:10, and he said he was going along fine and no problems. Except he didn't have a radar, and that's when the mate gave him his position, the 15 miles north of the Chris Point at 144 degrees. At what time was the last time that you had any cause or that you noticed that you had the Fitzgerald in front of you, over? 1900, he was approximately 15 miles from the high hump at Chris Point. That's when I was talking to him. He was 15 miles from the land. I asked him how he was making out with his problem. He said he lost those vents and he had a list, and he said he was holding his own. The last time I talked with him, he said he was holding his own, and that's the last time I lost contact after that. This is Group 2, roger that, and also I understand there were 3 up-outers that were to keep an eye out for this, for the Fitzgerald, and they They passed with negative contact, is that correct? Roger on that. We tried to call him about 6 or 8 times on emergency FM and emergency FM and every day, and we cannot reach. This is Super Control, Roger. We have it. Do you think there's any possibility that you could come about and go back there and do any searching? Over. Oh, God, I don't know. The sea out there is tremendously large, and if you want me to, I can, but I'm not going to be making any time. I'll be lucky to make 2 or 3 miles an hour going back out that way. This is True Control. You're probably one of the only vessels right now that can get to the scene. We're going to try to contact those saltwater vessels and see if they can't possibly come about and come back also. But I understand you are alerted, is that correct? On the radar here 10 minutes ago when they were right up to that area. This is True Control, Roger. We're trying to get a Coast Guard aircraft launched to come up to the area. But I would say things look pretty bad, like she may have split apart at the seams like the Morale did a few years back. Again, you think you could come about and go back and take a look in the area? Over. No, I'll go back and take a look, but God, I'm afraid that I'm going to take a hell of a beating out there on it. If they could get a search, if you could get a chopper over there, they'd be blowing over towards Copper Mine Point, and I don't know how far in there I could get. Do you realize what the conditions are out there? Hello, Super. You realize what the conditions are out there, don't you? This is True Control, the captain of the port speaking. We have no other vessels in that vicinity right now, but it looks from the information that we have that it's fairly certain that the Fitzgerald went down, and we're talking now about a matter of life and death and looking for survivors that might be in life rafts or in the water, and we can only ask the masters to do the best without hazarding their vessel. The vessel you're searching for is the Edmund Fitzgerald. I'll turn around and give it a whirl, but God, I don't know. I'll give it a try. This is True Control. Roger, understand. Request you to do the best you can and see if you could sight any sign of any lights in the water or any debris or any life rafts or anything that might indicate survivors from the vessel. Over. Well, I don't know. It seems funny. I mean, we've been shadowing them all the time, and then when you started looking for them, you couldn't find them. That's True Control, Roger. No peep out of them. That's the thing that really strikes me is that you didn't even have time to give us the distress call. That was the last that he really had a good contact with her because it was snowing and the sea returned a bit. I still think that we should run across oil or something. Roger, the aircraft that's not off your starboard bow is a Canadian C-130. He's going to make a pass and drop some flares ahead of you. And we saw a life jacket, but they can't hold them long enough to maneuver to get up to where we're going to pick something up, which I'm trying to do right now. But we're right in the area where we spotted all the debris. We're right in the area because we picked up several pieces of orange-type wood, looks like, out of a lifeboat, and that definitely was a life jacket. Let's see if I can get a name.
Yeah, and I got that audio off of YouTube, and it's pretty powerful stuff. That was the mostly the captain of the Arthur M. Anderson and the Coast Guard Sioux Control, they called it back then. But now they call it Sector Sioux for Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan. And, of course, the Canadians have their thing there in Sioux, Ontario, being that that lock system's right on the border. But, yeah, it's pretty crazy. That's been 40 years. And Gordon Lightfoot was actually up there at the Shipwreck Museum on Whitefish Point yesterday. He didn't come up, I guess he has something to do in Canada today. So he was up there yesterday going through the museum. At one point, they took a dive on the wreck. It took them a while to find it, but they did eventually find it. And they reproduced the bell, the ship's bell, for the Edmund Fitzgerald. And in 1995, they went down and replaced the original bell. They brought Fitzgerald's bell up, and they put the new one on there. And the new one has the names of the 29 sailors that are buried there at the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. So anyway, I hope that was informative and not too drawn out, me reading the timeline there, but just interesting how that all happened back then, and I think if it wasn't for Gordon Lightfoot, we wouldn't be talking about this right now. And too bad I can't play that song, but I'm sure if you live anywhere in the Midwest United States or the Great Lakes area of Canada, you've probably heard that at least once today. So with that, we'll catch you tomorrow for another episode of Mike Dell's World. Tomorrow's Veterans Day. I don't know if I'm going to do anything special for that, but tomorrow is Veterans Day or Armistice Day. I think in Canada they call it Remembrance Day, or was that a few days ago? I don't know. The end of World War I happened at 11/11 on the 11th of November, and that's how that holiday became Armistice Day, and then they changed it to Veterans Day at some point. Maybe I'll look up some of that and we'll talk about it tomorrow. Till then, catch you later.